If we are more connected than ever before, why do so many people feel so alone? This was an interesting conversation that I had with one of my friends, and if you take a long look at the long arc of human history, one thing becomes immediately clear. Human beings were never meant to live the way we live now. You know, for most of our existence, survival depended on proximity. You would live in a tribe, a village, a clan, a community, or an extended family, for example. You would work with the same people you ate with. You were surrounded by relatives, neighbors, children, elders, every single day. Your life was embedded in a social structure so tightly woven that identity and community were almost the same thing. You would never ask, who am I? You would just ask, where do I belong? And the answer was obvious. You belong to your people. If you were separated from them, it usually meant one of the two things, either exile or death. Being alone was never a lifestyle. It was a threat. In fact, and I was reading this, historians point out that the words loneliness didn't even exist in English until the 18th century or 19th century. I have to double check. Before that, the word was oneliness, which simply meant being alone without the emotional suffering we associated with it today. Being alone used to be neutral, sometimes even spiritual, you know, and a lot has changed. Believe me, a lot has changed. The first fracture was basically industrialization. You know, the shift began during the Industrial Revolution. You know, before industrialization, most people lived in rural areas. Families were large, generations lived under the same roof or in the same street. Work was local. Community wasn't something you had to build, it was something you were born into. Then factories appeared, you know. Cities expanded. People left their villages in massive numbers searching for work. They moved into crowded urban environments where nobody knew them, nobody shared their history, and nobody cared about their family name. So for the first time, millions of people were surrounded by others, but emotionally disconnected from them. Karl Marx called this alienation. He believed industrial society didn't just exploit workers economically. It separated them from their humanity, their purpose. Whether or not you agree with his politics, the psychological observation was accurate. Modern life was producing people who felt increasingly disconnected from their work and even from themselves. And that was only the beginning. As society modernized, tradition lost its authority. You know, family structures became smaller, social roles became less defined. People were no longer told who they were supposed to be. At first, this looked like progress, and in many ways it was. I mean, you were no longer forced into your father's profession. You could choose who to marry. You could move across the world. You could reinvent yourself. But freedom comes with a psychological cost. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Man is condemned to be free." And what he meant was this: when nothing defines you, everything becomes your responsibility. Your identity, your success, your happiness, your meaning. In traditional societies, meaning was given. In modern societies, meaning must be constructed. And not everyone knows how to build it. So freedom slowly turns into pressure, then anxiety, then isolation, and then loneliness. You know, over the last century, the institutions that once created automatic belonging began to weaken. Most people used to be part of religious congregations, trade unions, neighborhood groups, civic clubs, extended families, local traditions, etc., etc., etc. These structures, they weren't perfect, but they provided something essential. Repeated face-to-face contact with the same people over long periods of time. And what does this mean? This means that repetition creates trust. Trust creates connection. Connection creates meaning. But those structures have faded away. There was Robert Putnam. He described in one of his books, I don't remember his books now, the name of the book, but he noticed that people were still doing the same activities, but no longer together. They were bowling. The name of the book is Bowling Alone. So basically they were bowling, but not in leagues anymore. It was a small change that reflected a massive shift. We stopped building shared lives and we started building individual ones. Industrialization started the loneliness trend, but the digital age accelerated it. Nowadays, we carry in our pockets devices that gives us access to more people than any human in history could ever meet. We can message across the planet instantly. We can see what thousands, if not millions of people are doing at any moment. And yet, loneliness is rising. Why? Because technology connects us in a very specific way, not through intimacy, but through visibility. Social media encourages people to present idealized versions of themselves. So they compare their lives to others. They measure their worth in likes and views. They perform constantly for an invisible audience. We are more connected than ever, but we feel more alone than ever. Scrolling, liking, following is not the same as talking, caring, or truly knowing someone, exposing your vulnerabilities. Digital interaction creates the illusion of connection without the emotional depth real relationships require. And look, loneliness is not simply being alone. It is the emotional state that appears when there is a gap between the relationships you want and the relationships you have. You can be in a crowded room and feel lonely, in a relationship and feel lonely. It's very normal to be surrounded by people and feel lonely. Loneliness is it's like a biological alarm system. Hunger tells you that you need to eat. Thirst tells you need to drink. Loneliness tells you that you need to reconnect. But chronic loneliness changes the brain. It makes people more sensitive to rejection, more socially anxious, more withdrawn, more disconnected, more defensive. So loneliness creates a loop. It creates this. You feel lonely. You become socially cautious. Your interactions feel awkward or distant. People respond less warmly. You feel even more lonely. So this, over time, this loop reinforces itself. And the effects are not just emotional. I've read a lot of research reports says that loneliness is linked to inflammation, poor sleep, heart disease, cognitive decline, depression and anxiety, substance abuse, and in the most fucked up one is suicide. Some researchers now call this a behavioral epidemic, not caused by bacteria or viruses, but by social disconnection. Loneliness, besides being a social issue, is an existential one also. When people lose connection to others, they often lose connection to purpose as well. Viktor Frankl called this the existential vacuum. He described it as the quiet sense that life feels empty. Not always dramatic despair, but just a dull, persistent boredom. People move through routines: work, entertainment, sleep, repeat. Work, entertainment, sleep, repeat. But without deep connection, those routines feel hollow. And then you start having dangerous questions inside of your head. What's the point? Does anyone actually care? Would it matter if I disappeared? You know, zero activity and a deep level of self-awareness is a very dangerous combination. And why this generation feels it most? Young adults today report some of the highest levels of loneliness. There are several reasons. People marry later, have children later, settle down later. They get financial stability later. Housing is expensive. Jobs are unstable. Career paths are always uncertain. And many social skills were developed through screens instead of real-world environments. And the most fucked up thing is that social media constantly exposes people to curated versions of others' lives, creating the illusion that everyone else is happier, that everyone else is more successful than you, that they are more connected, that they are more loved. But it's complete bullshit. It's bullshit. You cannot compare your worst day to somebody else's best 15 seconds. And this isn't about bad luck or the result of a few failed relationships. Loneliness isn't about that. Loneliness, this is more of a reflection of the world we've built. We've created cities where millions live side by side without ever speaking. We invented technology that can reach anyone at any given moment, yet it often replaces real conversations with endless scrolling. Neighborhoods became apartments. Extended families became isolated units. Shared meals became food deliveries, and real presence turned into digital avatars. We basically engineered a lifestyle where isolation feels normal. Everything today is optimized for convenience and independence. We're told self-sufficiency is the goal, that needing others is a weakness. Focus on your goals, secure your future, build yourself, improve yourself. And on paper, it sounds admirable, it sounds marvelous. But human beings were never designed for total independence. Our brains, our emotions, our own identities, our true selves, everything about us is shaped in relationship with other people. Connection isn't a bonus feature, it's part of the operating system. So when that disappears, of course, people will feel hollow. There is no app, no algorithm, no technology, no artificial intelligence that can replace, for example, a hug, eye contact, shared laughter, or just the silent companionship with someone you trust or love. You know, there is no technological fix for loneliness, because the problem was never communication, it's connection. And real connection is it's unpredictable and uncomfortable. It takes time, it takes presence, attention, vulnerability, exposure, the very things modern life tries to eliminate. So here we are at this crossroads. The first generation in history that can be connected to thousands of people and still feel completely alone. I mean, we were told everything is our responsibility. I already said this before, like, if you're unhappy, fix yourself. If you're lonely, improve yourself. But no one warned us how heavy that freedom would feel. When nothing defines you, everything depends on you. And that pressure quietly crushes people who look fine on the surface level, but feel empty inside. But this is a message. This is basically a message. You know, loneliness carries a message. It reminds us that we were never meant to live as isolated individuals drifting through life. It pushes us towards something deeper, not bigger, but more honest. Real conversations, real friendships, small, deliberate acts of presence and truth. And yes, we may be the loneliest generation, but we're also the first to see the problem clearly. And once you see it, you can't pretend anymore. You stop blaming yourself. You start searching for what's real. The cure was never having more apps, more followers, more likes, more views, more comments, more DMs, or more noise. No. The cure was never that. The cure was always this: fewer people, more truth, and the courage to actually show up for one another. One real conversation can break weeks of silence. One honest connection can outweigh 100 shallow ones. You don't need a crowd. You don't need a perfect life. Sometimes all it takes is a single person, a single moment of truth to remind you that you were never meant to walk this world completely alone. And that means it's never too late to reach out, to open up, and to build something real in a world that desperately needs it.